Hello everyone, and welcome to my YouTube beginner series. My name is Innocent, and on today's episode I'll be explaining VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP. And by the end of this video you understand how VLOOKUP works, how XLOOKUP works, and the difference between them. So let's get started. On my screen here we have the names of some employees and the employee ID alongside with the department, salary, and rating. Okay, so here we have the names, the department, and salary. So I want to look up these names here and then bring out their department alongside their salary. This is where VLOOKUP comes to play. So to use the formula, what you need to do is to click on the equals to sign, then type VLOOKUP. Then this lookup value is the value that you want to return. So you click on this here, that's G3, then click on the comma. Then the table array is the table containing the full data. So here I'm going to highlight the whole table. Okay, then click on the comma. And the next option here is the column index number. So here I'm going to count the position. For instance, I'm looking at for the department. So I'm going to start from this first column here, which is name. Because for VLOOKUP, you need to ensure that the lookup value should be in the first column. Then that should be number 1, followed by the corresponding criteria. So here the name is number 1, employee ID is number 2, department is number 3. So click on 3, then comma, then 0. So 0 will give you the exact match of what you are looking out for. So click on 0, then close with the bracket and press enter. That's it. So this automatically would give you the corresponding department. So let's try it one more time for Sarah. So Sarah here is in number 6. Okay, so we'll come here, the same formula equals to VLOOKUP. So let's look up Sarah in the whole data sets. Then the department is in number 3, 1, 2, 3. Then click on 3, then 0 to give you the match, then press enter. So as expected, you can always drag down to fill in for every other person. However, if you remember in my last video, if you are trying to use formulas like this while dragging down, you need to ensure that you lock the position of the cell, otherwise it's going to be giving you a different data entirely. Okay, please always remember that. Just like this, if you look at the position of HR Mary, can you see that this captured the whole set from A to E? But if you come down to Benita, it skipped this part and then jumped right down to number 15. So always ensure that while dragging down, you need to lock the range. Use F4 button to lock the cell to make it static in a position. So the moment you are dragging down, you will not experience issues like this. So let's try again and click on Benita. You can see the position is locked. Let's try and click on Jude. Good. So now let's return the value for salary. So the same way, let's come here, equals to VLOOKUP. So we're looking out for Mary in this whole set. Then press F4 to lock the position. Then salary is in number 1, 2, 3, 4. So the salary is in number 4. Click on comma, 0, then close the brackets. So here we have 130,000. So you can always drag down to apply it. I'm going to explain some interesting thing about VLOOKUP. Now, let's say there's a name that is not present here. For instance, I added Martins. So automatically you should know that Martins is not here. So there's no way it's going to give you any information. So here is going to show N/A not available. So it simply means that there is no return value for Matthew. So it's always show error. So whenever you're using VLOOKUP and you see something like this, it simply means that the data you are trying to pull out in the original data has no criteria in the specific column. So as such, it's going to return the not available. So let's try it for this. So this time around, I'm going to be working with employee ID. Now employee ID is in this set column here. Let me paint it here. So just like it I explained earlier on. So I'm going to press the equals to sign, VLOOKUP, then look up the employee ID, comma, then in the O data set. So like I said, the data you're looking at for, which is the employee ID, the lookup value should be in the first column, then other criteria will follow after. So in this case, since I'm looking out for employee ID will be number 1, and I'm going to group it like this. Then the table array is from the employee ID down to the rating. Then the column index is the position of the criteria I'm looking at for, which is salary. So employee ID is number 1, department is number 2, salary is number 3. I'm going to press 3, 0, and then close the bracket, enter. Good. So, but remember, ensure that you always lock the position. Ensure that you always lock the position so you would not have a wrong presentation. So you can drag down to apply it to the rest. Okay. So same with the rating. So for the rating, we can always do the same process. Now there is a trick here if you want to use VLOOKUP. Let's say you want to pull out several criteria. For instance, let's come here. I'm going to delete this. Now let's say I want to pull out rating. So instead of me to input the formula one after the other, for instance, instead of me to input the department formula, input the salary formula, input the rating formula, I want to pull all the old information at once. So there's a trick to it. So here I'm going to put the equals to sign, VLOOKUP. So I'm looking out for Mary, the table array, that's the table containing the old data, which is this. Then I'm going to select multiple index at the same time. Instead of me to input it one after the other, I can group them at once. So I'm going to look at the position of department. So if you look at from this table here, department falls in position number 3. So I'm going to use this, then 3. Then the position of salary falls in number 4. Position of the rating falls in number 5. Then close it with the curly bracket, then 0 to give me then close everything and press enter. So by this, it's going to automatically categorize everything at a click. So instead of me to be inputting it via multiple entry, I can always input it at once, then drag it down. Okay, that's good. So XLOOKUP is a much more advanced feature compared to VLOOKUP. So in this way, you can always edit the error response, or if there's no return value, you can manually tweak it and then provide a preferred note of your choice. Now this is the same data as the VLOOKUP. So I want to use VLOOKUP, I want to use XLOOKUP rather to return the data. So to use the XLOOKUP, click on equals to XLOOKUP. Then I'm looking out for Mary, in this column here, then then I'm going to look at the return array. What am I looking at for? I'm looking at for department. Then in department section, this, then if not found, this column, if not found, simply means that let's assume what I'm looking out for is not among the list of data sets. What should it give me? So I can customize this. I can use not found as a note. So that means that whenever it meets a name that is not available on the list, it's going to give me a customizable information. Then this match mode 0 to give me the exact value. Good. So this way, like I said, always remember to lock your lookup array so it will not spill over. So click here and then drag down to apply. Good. Now let's say we have a name here. Let's assume we add Martins. So it's going to give me not found. This simply means that Martins is not available. So I can customize it. I can decide to use not available. So depending on what I want, so I can decide to use this. It's going to give me the criteria and details. So that's for XLOOKUP. Now this one interesting feature about XLOOKUP, unlike VLOOKUP that you cannot look up the value if it's behind the lookup array, for XLOOKUP, irrespective of the position, you can always work with it. For instance, this is the department is in this position and I want to look at the corresponding name here which is behind it. Remember, for VLOOKUP, it's not possible. But with the use of XLOOKUP, something that you can do. So let's start with it. Click here, equals to XLOOKUP, then look out for the department in this. Then the return array should be the name. Then if not found, what error should you give me? I can decide to give it an empty space. So if you do like this, it's going to put an empty space where there is no return value. Then 0 to give me the exact match, and press enter. So here you can always drag down. So this is where the XLOOKUP is at much more advantage compared to the VLOOKUP. So let's assume I have the same margins here and then there's no return value for it. So let me come here. I use space. So here is going to give me space. You can customize it. You can decide to use number. Let's assume I want is in terms of figures. I can decide to use 1. So if you're using figures, you don't need to put it in quotes. But if you're using letter or alphabet, you're meant to put it in quotes. None. Let me put none here. None. Then put it in quotes. Good. So here are the things you need to know about VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP. Number 1 is that VLOOKUP can only search from left to right, while XLOOKUP you can search left, right, up and down. It doesn't need any specific criteria to search. And another thing you need to know is that the VLOOKUP requires column number index. That is, you need to count the column. Even if you have a wide range of data, you need to manually count it one after the other for VLOOKUP. But for XLOOKUP, you can easily reference the search directly without searching manually. And then the major and the last difference for this tutorial is that for the VLOOKUP, it can always return the NA error message if the value is not found. However, for the XLOOKUP, you can always customize the message just like what I explained earlier in this video. So now that you understand both VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP, in the next video, I will show you how to use COUNTIF and SUMIF or conditional calculation. So if this video helped you, please like and subscribe for more Excel tutorial. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.